Be seated. Thank you. Good evening, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 4th International Conference on Teacher Learning and Development Forum. The theme for the forum is Language Education in Education 4.0, to be or not to be. This forum aims to discuss these pertinent issues with the hope of finding common grounds in achieving a favorable level of success in our endeavor of Education 4.0. This forum will be moderated by a highly experienced and knowledgeable person in the field of English education. He has rendered his service as trainer and consultant locally and internationally, and is currently a senior English lecturer in the Institute of Teacher Education, International Languages Campus, Kuala Lumpur. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the forum moderator, Dr. Chandran Abraham.
Good afternoon to all of you present here. First of all, let me give you a short preamble before we start the forum, and then I would also introduce the panelists for the forum today. Education 4.0 is currently a topic of interest among educators, and I think the practitioners in the education fraternity are in search for approaches, methodologies, and strategies and techniques in intimately embracing this new or latest development. I would say that not embracing, but intimately embracing. At times, I think the digital era has also caused or raised concerns. We have three prominent panelists with us today, and I think we are very fortunate to have them here. If you read their biography itself, I think it would take a long process because it's very colorful, I would say. First of all, I would like to call upon stage Professor Dr. Zuraidah Muhammad Don. She's currently an adjunct professor in the local university and also the chair of the English Language Standards and Quality Council at the Ministry of Education. Thank you. I would like to now call upon Dato Chong. He's a well-known educationist, a public speaker, success mentor in Malaysia. He is the founder and managing director of ERICAN College, ERICAN Language Center, Corporate Training, and Corporate Training. Finally, I'd like to call upon Tan Sri Professor Dato Zulkifli Abdul Razak. He's, congratulations Tan Sri for being appointed as the new rector of UIA. One of the major concerns as we are embarking into Education 4.0 has been the element of following a bandwagon concept, especially when we talk about technology. We talk about embracing technology. But Tan Sri, I think I've read one of your articles and you have said about there's blind spots in, especially in this embracing of this new technology and embracing of, and sometimes we have to be wary of it. And I think it has shed a lot of light. I think I would like you to share some of your, what do you call, the reasons for making this statement in the press.
Thank you very much. I have problems with the word 4.0. To be honest with, when you say Education 4.0, automatically I ask, where is Education 3.0? And where is Education 2.0? So in other words, we are just putting these numbers, and we are not quite sure what the definition is all about. As far as I know, we have got Education 2030. That comes from the World Education Forum in Incheon in 2015. And the definition of Education 2030 is quite different from, I'm not too sure what the definition is 4.0. But my worry, when you, the moment you use 4.0, then you begin to sort of mechanize education. The word 4.0 certainly comes from the Industrial Revolution 4.0. You know, everything has got a number now. You know, I saw a book, Life 3.0. I am a little bit cautious when you use these numbers because it has a lot of implication. And this is where I talk about the blind spots, you know. For example, when you talk about Industrial Revolution 4.0, all right? Now, do you see the revolution as an event or as a continuum of events? Often people will look at 4.0 as an event by itself. Therefore, there's no relationship between what happened before 4.0. In other words, when you talk about 3.0, we are talking about computers, all right? And what is the association between computers and the fourth industrial revolution? Before computers, we talk about 2.0, which is electricity. Yeah? What is the association of electricity with computers and then with the fourth industrial? Before that, we talk about steam, water. Now, why I bring this? Because the moment I go down to the rural schools, half of them has no electricity. Some of them have no water. I just came back from Kota Belud, a place called Suang Punggol, which have no water for 42 years. Now, we have no right to talk about 4.0 if we don't even accomplish Revolution 1.0. And this is where I think the disconnect is, and this is where I think the blind spot is. So when you talk about 4.0, you're looking at an event, but that event, I think, has its own influence over the previous event. The continuum of events, I think we need to look at. So my worry is when we talk about 4.0, then it becomes an event in itself that you forget what is the one before that. Unless we settle those things, we will not arrive at 4.0. That's where the blind spot is.
And I think it's quite important to also take note that sometimes our aspirations are of looking at things at the 21st century, and especially, and we look at structures which are in the 19th century. And I think as an educator, Prof. Zuraidah, what do you think, how can we actually change our mindset so that we are able to embrace this new teaching strategies, this pedagogical transformation? How could we do that?
First of all, thank you for inviting me to be on the panel. Is this on? Yes. I think more importantly, I mean, Tan Sri was talking about 4.0 as an event. And another thing about the reality in our country, that there are many people in the rural areas that have lots of difficulties that they have to overcome. So we have different kind of scenario here. One is the change in the global environment. The other one is Malaysia as a member of that global environment. And within Malaysia itself, we have what we call differences in terms of what our students can do, what some of them can't do. I'll go to that. And also where they come from, their background, and how that affects their lives. Now, first of all, I think we do need to prepare our students for what is coming. The reality is that somehow, so I agree, Tan Sri, we do need to address, I'm talking about equity, we do need to address this issue of equity. At the same time, we do need to see how we're going to move forward in order for us to be able to function in this so-called world which has this an event called Fourth Industrial Revolution. What Fourth Industrial Revolution has brought is that it has, number one, because of this development in IT and AI and so on, what happened is that there are many jobs which we, especially when we are talking about our primary students who are coming to school now, in say 10 years from now, 12 years from now, they may not exist anymore. There will be a job which exists, but they need different kind of skills. So these are the things that we need to prepare our students for, and especially our teachers. And our teachers need to be able to adapt to this situation. Number one, adapt to the fact that we have the reality facing us, that our children, even like Tan Sri said, we have not gone beyond first industrial revolution because we have no electricity. At the same time, we also have to take note our participation in this globalized, global environment. What I think the teachers need to do is, as I said, not just the students need to adapt, the teachers need to adapt, we have to adapt as well, so that the quicker we adapt to whatever the world, the changing world, the better we are. But more importantly, I think, before we can adapt, we need to be able to train our teachers as well as students to have the will to change, to have that motivation to change. Because whatever it is, no matter how difficult your life is, if you have this will, this passion that you want to change, that you want to improve yourself, somehow you'll do it, although it's difficult. And our teachers need to have that so that they can help our children in the kampong to at least be, how do I say, be brought into the global world, the reality of this, because impact is great on them. Will they have a job in 10 years' time? What kind of job will they have? Yeah, because routine kind of job is now taken over by robots, by computer. Yeah, and again, information is everywhere. That's very important, which I will talk about it later. Information is everywhere. You can access information. Like during our time, the ability to access information is very good. Now it's not good anymore because you have information everywhere. It is ability to be critical of that information. I think this is what my fear is about our society. Are they critical of that information they get? And how do we build this criticalness in our people so that not just the people in KL will be able to benefit, also people from the kampong? Yeah, so.
Thank you, Prof. I think one of the key aspects that Prof you have highlighted has got to do with the element of having a good ability to be critical, co-creators of knowledge itself, how we are able to create knowledge and how we are able to escalate our thinking ability to an extent where we are not sponges, where we actually absorb but obviously create new information. I think this is where constructivism comes in, where new knowledge is constructed. But I think this is a concern or a challenge to most educators, especially when we are faced with students who are unable to actually bring themselves to a level of a thought of that particular level. So Dato Eric, in your private sector, in the institutions itself, how do you actually encourage the students to think out of the box? And like how in Singapore and other countries they have used computational thinking as one of the aspects. How do you manage this?
Thank you, Dr. Chandran. I think education has a purpose, and it is not just a process that is compulsory for young people. I think a lot of people send their children to school because what else is there to do? You send your children to school. But they forget education is actually supposed to serve a purpose, and that purpose is to actually mold them into useful adults, years from when they first started their education. The thing is this, if we're talking about education in the past, teachers were mainly teaching. The teaching was about imparting knowledge because information was not available back then. And therefore, what teachers do is to tell facts to students in class. So students will absorb like sponges. They take down notes, they try to remember what the teacher said, and that's the sole reason as to why you go to school. You are there to acquire knowledge. But today, I mean, things have changed so much. You know, if you are a teacher, I think, especially if you are a lecturer at a, when you're teaching more advanced students or older students, then you probably notice that whatever you say, I think students are verifying busily, not busily taking down notes, but busily verifying whether or not you're actually saying it correctly. I mean, the facts, because they Google whatever you say immediately. I mean, nowadays, information has no value. It has zero value. I mean, it doesn't matter if you know more than the students. That is not where the value is. The value of a teacher is in how much this teacher is able to facilitate learning, how much this teacher is able to inspire the students so that the students become autonomous learners. I think a lot of teachers are still spoon-feeding the students because that's conventionally how we teach. But today, in order to help our students to think critically, it is not about telling the students what is right and what is wrong. It is about giving them or throwing them a question and encouraging them to fact-find, encouraging them to debate. And so, you know, the old exam-oriented education is out of style. I just came back from China, a week ago. You know, something incredible has happened in China. The Ministry of Education banned what? Banned tuition. I mean, this is crazy, right? What do you mean you ban tutoring? Yeah, no, it's illegal now. In China, you cannot go to a tuition center to take up tuition to prepare for exams. That's illegal. So you can't teach that. They also banned academic competitions. That means you cannot have a storytelling contest in school and rank the students. You're a champion, you're second, you're third, you're fourth. You can't do that. No singing competition, no public speaking competition, no academic competition. Olympiad math was the first one to be banned in China. That happened in March, so it was just about 3-4 months ago. So this has created a very big chaos to the to the private education providers in China because of this change in policy. Now, so in China, everything is policy driven. So if the government says no, then basically it wipes out that whole industry overnight. And the reason why they do this is because they no longer want the younger generation of the Chinese population to be totally just academic driven. You know, the extent that these parents went to prepare their children to score top marks, to get into the top universities and all that, has become a really big problem in China. I mean, children become suicidal. Parents are taking creativity totally out of their children. They just want their children to become examination robots. Or, you know, if they want to win a singing competition, they train the children so much, the children's lost, they totally lose the joy of singing. They're not enjoying it anymore. They just need to attain perfections like North Koreans doing those, you know. I mean, so China has embraced this education concept that examination is 50%. So Gaokao and all that is still there, but it only takes 50% of the importance of that education. And then assessment is 50%. That is activity-based, behavioral-based, and all that. So students are encouraged to participate in extracurricular activities, demonstrate their leaderships, go for camps, do social work, and all that. So they're graded like that. So to answer your question, I think the world is really fast changing. Think about China as a very traditional, country when it comes to academic concept, because we always say the Asian mentality is always just exam driven. It's changed. It's just changed overnight. And so, what do Malaysians do? And how do we, prepare our younger generation, for the future? So I think we can use the China model as a sort of a discussion point.
Thank you, Dato. I think there are a few aspects that have been highlighted here. One of the things that I think, Dato, you have highlighted has got to do with the growth of the mind. Sometimes when we talk about the growth of the mind, there are two aspects. One is where you find that when it's product-based or process-based, and you find that how you do allow the mind to grow. So coming into allowing our mind to grow, I think you have highlighted something which we are in a non-competitive environment, and so we find that we allow ourselves or chart out our own learning path. I think that's where heutagogy comes in, and where we are able to actually determine our own learning path and take, I think, responsibility for our learning. Tan Sri, I think this has been a concept or an issue that has been always driven in most of the educational sectors in Malaysia. However, much that we talk about heutagogy, charting out our own learning path, I think we do come to a point of standstill at times. However much one would want to do it, I think there is another force that binds us from not wanting to proceed. What are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are quite clear, I think, because we do not have our own identity as to what education is all about. We tend to copy a lot more others around us and try to define that as education. I mean, you just talk about the 21st century learning. In Malaysia alone, you have got 21st century classrooms, 21st century education, but there's no one definition of 21st century learning. The only one that I know of, and which is I believe in, is this UNESCO 4 Pillars of Learning for 21st Century. There was a book that came out in 1996 that talks about the 4 pillars of learning: learning to do, learning to know, learning to be, and learning to live together. You know, these are the 4 pillars of learning. And I'm not too sure Malaysia has got all the 4 pillars in. We've got certainly pillars, learning to do, learning to know. It ends up in examinations. Yeah? But how many of our students have got this learning to be and learning to live together? In other words, we don't have this complete 4 pillars to make education the 21st century education as defined by UNESCO. We always talk about 21st century education in terms of technology. You have technology, you see you're 21st century, but you still do not know learning to be and learning to live together. In fact, technology makes you even worse in terms of living together. Everybody sits on one table, but they with their own, own handphone. They're very much away from living together. I think that's the first concept. Now, the second thing is that when I look at these 4 pillars of learning, I go back to our own falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan. If you look at the falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan, it says you must be a balanced human person. That's what we want to produce. We don't want to produce a person who is for the market. And this is what universities are asked us to do. You must produce graduates who are marketable. Are we a product that to be marketed? I can market this, but can I market him? Can I market her? But those are the languages that we use, and these are the languages that influence the way we think about education. So when you say we want to produce the balanced human being, what is balance in the falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan? Everybody knows this: intellectual, physical, emotional, spiritual. But look at your curriculum. Do you have all these 4 in? I doubt so. So you want to balance, you want to produce a balanced student, but you don't have these balanced elements in your curriculum. In fact, I would go one step further. Are the teachers themselves balanced? Are the headmaster balanced? Are the DG balanced? Minister, Prime Minister, all they balanced? If they are not balanced, then how do you produce a balanced student? In other words, the system itself is already imbalanced. And therefore, we need to work on the system. If the system is not balanced, then how do you produce a balanced human being? Going back to what Dato is saying, it's essentially that what education is all about. Where do you got all this competition and stuff like that? It comes from the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution with the factory model basically tells us education must be like a factory. And you look at your school system now, it is a factory. The so-called teachers are basically just an operator in a whole system. So we've got the system wrong, and therefore we will not produce the result that we want. At the end of the day, our education system becomes anything but education. I think that's a challenge that we must rise. We teachers must speak our mind on this. If we don't, then I think we will be bogged down in a system that do not produce educated people. They can be, they have degrees, but they can be crooks at the same time. Most of the crooks in this country are educated people. I will say that again. With the Tan Sri and the Dato, they are the ones that are occupying the jails at the moment in time. So where have we gone wrong? I think that's a question that we need to, it's a hard question, but that's a question that we need to ask, and to contextualize it, where is the falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan now in the school system? You walk to any school, do you see the falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan hang on any walls? None. When I give lectures this to my own colleagues, even Vice Chancellor, the first question I ask them, what is falsafah pendidikan kebangsaan? Less than 1% would know. You are in a business and education, but you don't know the falsafah, I think you are in the wrong place. I think that's where the actual problem is, to my mind.
Thank you, Tan Sri. I think you have opened up another aspect which has got to do with humanizing education. And in Japan, what we talk about, I got it from your article too, where we talk about how the norms of values are actually used as the parameter, especially when you design the curriculum itself. So when we talk about humanizing education, Prof. Zuraidah, I think one of the things that we are looking at is how do we actually give priority? Where do we prioritize? Or I think what Tan Sri had said here is that sometimes I find that more focus is given on particular aspects and not on values itself. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I agree totally with Tan Sri, of course. I think we need to produce a balanced individual. We have to, particularly in this period where you can get information anywhere, you can do lots of things, and one has to have certain values. There must be, we have to make sure that our students, just not giving them, what do you call that, information, giving them knowledge, is not enough. Number one, giving them knowledge. We have to go beyond that to applying knowledge. That's very important. But more importantly, besides applying knowledge, you also have to have an individual that cares, an individual with integrity. We cannot say that, suddenly, after leaving school, you have to have integrity, you've got to care, and it's a bit late. So it has to start very early on, from preschool, early on. But if you look at children at school, preschool students especially, they work well together. They collaborate. They might be quarreling with each other. They might be screaming at each other, but they get back together and they work closely. We should see them. That is the human being, the real human being, a child, an innocent child, innocent children working together where they speak their mind, very good. Yeah, they don't bear grudges because after that they get back together. Only the parents do not seem to not be talking to each other, but the children are okay. So, but then the thing is that when we talk about balance, producing balanced individual, about a holistic approach to learning, I think we need to look at the learning environment itself, the ecosystem of learning. What are we trying to do here? Are we producing a robot without thinking, not thinking very well, but an individual without a heart, an individual that can do anything, yeah, and doesn't feel guilty about doing it without any conscience? We can't. So we need to have, in the whole education system, there must be an environment, number one, an environment that encourages learning, knowledge, but applying the knowledge, and also that your knowledge has impact on society. It's not just, oh, I'm going to do this because I'm going to get that. I'm going to do this because I'm going to get money. I don't think money should be our focus. Money, yes, you get, but you need to focus on doing good first. If society is like that, we don't have a problem. Next, in order for our students, as I said before, in order for our students to be able to develop the resilience that even periods of difficulty, they can go on, believe in themselves and go on. They need to have the will, the motivation. And beside that, I think we need to train our students to be critical and, of course, creative. Critical in that sense, you don't just accept anything. And when we ask people to be critical, you've got to have the consequences of others become critical. You also have to accept the fact that you'll be criticized. I think all of us, even professors at university, you've got to accept the fact that it's part of learning. We are learning. And I was just saying, like, for example, I was at the back of the classroom listening to, listening to teachers presenting something. And I was learning. What I was learning is that I was learning how teachers try very hard. I mean, people look at, grammatical mistakes. I don't look at that. For me, I look at this teacher trying very hard to be creative in the classroom, to make their students learn. But if you want to be critical, you say, lots of grammatical mistakes. And I said, who doesn't make grammatical mistakes, especially when you're talking? I'm trying to say, what I'm saying is that there must be support. When we are criticizing, it is not to destroy, but to improve. I think we have to have that. And then when you criticize, it's not for the self, but to help others. Together we improve. So this is a thing that we need to, from early on, we need to have teamwork, working together, that the good students can help the poor, so that all of us, as a nation, if we have anybody left behind, you will not improve, because there will always be dissatisfaction. So we need to move on. Yeah? You need to inspire our young one. The thing is that if you go to the classroom every day and you will be, okay, today we're going to learn the present tense. Okay? You can imagine that? Rote learning, drilling. That is not how children learn. However, I'm not saying that these are not important. They are, but they are for a different purpose. If we want our students to learn. Let them make mistakes, because mistakes is part of learning. Let them realize they're not good enough. I think one thing about us is that, I'm saying, yeah, about us is that we tend to think we are so good that there's no room for improvement. I tell you, I always tell people, God is perfect. None of us is perfect. Everything that we do, of course there will be problem, but we try to make sure that what we do is to be as good as possible. So we don't expect to be perfect, because none of us can be perfect. But I think the most important, like Tan Sri said, Dato said, that most important is your heart. It's the heart that counts. Yeah, the brain, of course, you need to be intelligent. Of course, you need the country cannot develop if none of us are good enough. But the country will develop further and make people happy if what we do comes from the heart. There must be the heart that counts and the heart that cares. And I think that's very important. Yeah.
May I sort of add to that? So may I add to that? I think Prof, made a really good point. You see, when we talk about tertiary education, I always hear, because I come from the private sector, so I always hear people talking about the goal of education is employability. I think it's so wrong. I really don't think that the goal, the ultimate goal, if the ultimate goal of education is just to ensure that these students are employable, then I think we're missing the big picture. I think employability is a given. In fact, in the future world, forget about employability. What do you mean employability? You mean there are jobs? I mean, you want to work for someone? I mean, the world has changed so much. Now, say for example, when we think in terms of the industrial revolution, when say, for example, automobiles were first invented. It rendered the horses irrelevant. So no more. The horse is gone. I mean, And then, you had factories. The funny thing is this, right? As the world progresses, human beings will always find a way to fit in and still remain relevant and productive. So when mass production came into place, everybody thought that in that case, then all the jobs will be wiped out because the machines are doing all the work. But no, people were still gainfully employed because these machines needed to be operated by people. Now, when we talk about 4.0, I mean, a lot of the jobs that we are familiar with now, they will no longer be there. But does it mean that people will all be doing nothing? I don't think so. But I think the future world is a world that young people or the future generation will have a lot of freedom in terms of choosing how they want to live, in terms of choosing how they want to function as human beings. I don't think they'll be defined by jobs. I think a lot of them will be doing their own things. So I think a lot of self-employment. But I think the most important thing about education is not about making sure that the students become employable. I think it is about making sure that the students are equipped with all the right qualities that a good human being should possess. That is the ultimate aim of education. And that's why when I was thinking about what kind of education I wanted to give to my own students, I chucked employability out the window, because I think if your education is relevant, they'll be employable naturally, and they will be able to to work on their own, or they will become their own people. What I wanted to do was to make sure that my students are students who are empowered, are students who are inspired, so that they will want to achieve greatness. So when they want to, when I talk about greatness, it's not about becoming Einstein. It's about achieving what they can achieve at their utmost. That means they are not wasting their potential. That means they believe that if they don't do their level best, they're being environmentally unfriendly. They're wasting human resources. That means they think that they want to be contributing to society positively. So when our graduates, other than acquiring knowledge and skills, in that educational process, but if they actually have these concepts deeply rooted in their minds, I think then they cannot go wrong. So when they graduate and they come out to society, I think they will automatically fit in. We don't have to worry about whether or not these people can find jobs. I think these people will find a way to make themselves useful and to make themselves positive assets to society. And as long as you are a positive asset to society, I think the rest is a given. Because, I always believe that financial security is only a healthy byproduct of all the right things you do. Because you're contributing to society, society will reward you automatically. I mean, assuming that you're doing the right things, the more money you make, it means the more contribution you've given. Of course, unless you're selling drugs, then there's no good. Then the more money you make, that means the more you harm society. But assuming you're doing the right things, so if we equip the children with the right kind of mindset, and then we encourage them to excel, the higher, the more they achieve, the more they contribute to society, the better off they'll live. And I think the rest will, take care of itself.
Okay, that is pretty interesting, I think, from Prof and Dato here. One of the aspects that has been highlighted has got to do with the humanization of education, the wholesome individual, how we are able to ensure that the values are incorporated. And obviously, when you become a balanced individual, I think the knowledge that you gain and you are able to ensure that it is put to good use in the end. Now, when we talk about another interesting aspect in Education 4.0 is the streaming of or the focal point that is given to technology itself. A lot of people say that technology, that emphasis should be given at an early age, and some would say that there should be a specific stream that, like for science and arts, and so you should have technology. Then there are people who also say that maybe give everyone an exposure to technology and let them chart their own future. So in this rat race of technology, Tan Sri, what are your views pertaining to this?
Perhaps my views are quite well known on this. That's why the 4.0, I never liked it. Because the moment you put 4.0, it's already a mechanical way of looking at things, So it's dangerous to put education 4.0. But in any case, I think technology, I'm not denying technology, but we are very naive about technology. I mean, I'm sure I wrote in my last column about the latest research that was done for 10 countries. All of them are developed countries except 2, Malaysia and India. All right? And this is about digital lifestyle. And they asked, one of the questions is, how many of them are so dependent on their gadgets, devices, that they cannot live it even in a day? The global sample say 48%. 48% say I will not be able to live without my gadget even a day. All right? For Malaysian, 70%. 70% Malaysians say I will not be able to live without my gadget even a day. India is about 68%. Japan is about 28%. Germany is about 30%. Can you see the contradiction? The most technologically advanced country, the less obsessed they were with their gadgets. The least developed country technologically, India and Malaysia, the most obsessed. And in fact, the statement was that Malaysian is the most addictive as far as technology is concerned. Now, it says something about the system. It says something about our understanding of what technology is all about. You know, and I'm glad to read, betul tak betul, they're going to ban gaming now after midnight. That's what I read in the news today. Yeah. This has already been done in Japan, it's already been done in Korea, many done in many of these very well-wired sort of. So my issue is that do we understand this technology before we even jump on the bandwagon? You know, and I don't think many of us do. And I can bring back an example of how we take things without understanding it. One of the other battles that I'm fighting is this word modal insan. Human capital. Yeah? You read the falsafah pendidikan negara, there's no such thing as human capital. It talks about manusia seimbang. And suddenly everybody now, from the minister, even the prime minister will talk, kita nak menghasilkan modal insan yang terbaik. What is modal insan? Anybody can volunteer and answer. We've been using it day in, day out. You must know what it means. We don't. And if you read the human capital theory, it says that human capital is about a person who is very possessive about his own economic interest. That's it. If I come for a seminar today, I'll ask Chandran how much you're going to pay me, because that's my economic interest. You don't pay well enough, I say, it's okay, I've got another conference to attend to.
So how much are you going to pay?
You know? That's modal insan. And if you start to put this in education, then the same thing will happen in terms of mindset. Every student will say, what is my economic worth? So what happened to spirituality? What happened to emotion? What happened to the other three in seimbang? It's out of the window. Automatically out of the window. Please read the human capital theory and you know what modal insan is all about. It's all against what we've been talking about in terms of the falsafah pendidikan negara. My point is this. We keep on taking things from outside, put it into our system, and we never even understand it. Right? Now, what is the latest research as far as technology is concerned? Yeah? Everybody wakes up in the morning, will look at the handphone first. Right or wrong? Right? Now, what does it say after that? You will look at the gadget 200 times a day, whether you are conscious about it or not. You know? So that's a kind of addiction that has gone into using this gadget without us realizing it. How do you realize it? Basically, let's change this gadget into a cigarette. You wake up in the morning, you smoke the first puff, that's it. But you will smoke 200 cigarettes a day, together in a day. 200 means a packet of 10, 20 or a packet of 10 every day. What does it make you? A nicotine addict or tobacco addict. Now, for you to look at your handphones without rhyme or reason 200 times a day already put you in a vulnerable state of being an addict. And where have we, in our system, tell our students how to use this gadget? You know, it's just like smoking at one time. The tobacco industry know 50 years ago that when you smoke, you'll get addicted. But they do not tell us. And they keep on saying, please smoke, please smoke, please smoke, because they know you'll get addicted and therefore, you know, it's good for them. I guess the same thing about handphones. Maxis will say, Cellcom will say, use, we will reduce the charge. You can speak as long as you want to your grandmother, to your mother, to your friend. Call overseas, it's cheap enough. At the end, what are they doing? They are trying to make us dependent on this system. When do we tell our students how to use this in a more ethical way? We don't have. So we are jumping into technology, Chandran. My worry is without even understanding. What is France doing now? As far as I know, all gadgets in the school are banned. Schools sometimes provide what they call handphone hotels. That you go in, you plug in your handphone and lock it up and take the key with you. Why do they do that? Because in the 8 hours in school, they want to retrain these people to have a face-to-face dialogue. They want to train these people how to interact as human beings, to humanize the system again. After the 8 hours, you can live with the handphone the way you want it. But at least within that 8 hours, they are retraining people to be human beings again. And I think that's what education is all about. And if you don't do this well with education, with technology, we will lose them.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Obviously, I would say that a lot of us, including me, we are guilty of it, and I think we are more of an addict rather than... one of the issues that you have pointed out is that in school, if we are able to educate our children in the rightful manner of using technology, I would say that there should be an element of fun that is brought in. And I think fun is one of the aspirations of the current, one of the current pedagogical strategies in order to ensure that somehow the objectives are achieved. So that you find that obviously this is a concern and a challenge to some of the teachers, because many of the times I think many of us are very prescriptive in the way that we do things. So Prof, how do you think we would be able to bring in this element of fun so that our dependency on technology would be there and would not be there too much? But we are able to still meet the aspirations of the 21st century teaching.
Thank you, Chandran. Yes, it's very frightening to find couple in a restaurant not talking to each other, but looking at their mobile, while we, the one in the 60s and 50s, are really talking to each other, and you look at the young ones, they are not talking to each other. So yeah, they are talking to their phone or something, they even text each other and they laugh. So what, okay, perhaps I can relate to the English language education that we are implementing at the moment at school. In the past, we know that we are teaching. We teach English in order for them to communicate. So the focus for us now is to enable our students to communicate as human beings, to communicate with their friends, with the teachers. So what we're saying is that for teachers, in order for students to communicate in class, as you put it, you have to have fun, especially students at school, even at university, they love fun because they don't go to class unless it's fun, unless of course they have to sign, then they will come to class, but they'll be bored in class. So what we're saying is that the CFR Common European Frame of Reference, our focus is to help students to communicate in writing, communicate in speaking, and in order to communicate, of course, you have to read, you have to listen, and that's very important. And one thing which is very important about communicating is that it's not just production. At the moment, even though we are interacting, but we're actually producing rather than interacting in a way. We have our own thinking, we don't really interact. But one of the things that we also encourage our students is to interact, that means they talk to each other. And when you allow students to interact, of course, they make a lot of noise, they make mistakes, and the teachers have to sort of control yourself a bit. Let them talk, let them communicate, because by talking, by communicating, they are interacting with another human being, which especially now is more important than before. In the past, we don't have our gadget with us. All we do is go to class, we see our friends, we love our friends, we keep on talking non-stop until our teachers ask us to stop talking. But now, we have to train our children to talk, to communicate as a normal human being. Not just that, to be able to disagree with your friends in a way that your friends say, oh, you're right, I agree with you. Oh, I don't agree with you. Yeah, yeah. So now, you just do that. Now, I'm also very good at that. I do that as well, you know. I don't know I don't know that symbol. So my daughter said, Mama, you're learning. But I said, actually, I don't quite like this because I'm not communicating. Yeah. So that's very important, communicate. Another thing is important is that when you communicate, you become aware of you as a human being because it means that you're sharing your thoughts. Yeah, you share your thoughts and you share your feelings. How do you express feelings? We may not be able to express our feelings because we have a handphone, suddenly this, smiley and all that. We will not be able to express in words. Maybe to say, I love you will not, you will be too embarrassed to say, I love you to, I don't know. So you tend to laugh, a smiley and a laugh, which I did as well. So expressing human feelings are very important. And the classroom, that has to be it. And teach students need to laugh and enjoy. But at the same time, while you are playing, you see, this is about play. When human beings play, because when we were young, we play all the time. It doesn't mean, but teachers must be careful. You don't just play and not achieving anything at the end of it. We can't just allow our students to go, playing. But what I'm saying is that you need to give them activities where they can actually play. By the end of it, there is a purpose to achieve. One thing good about CFR is very much task-based. It is task-based. Task-based relating to the real world. And the focus is very important, is what the students can do rather than what students can't do. So even when you are a student from Kelantan, going to what we call moving towards A1, if the teacher asks you, do you like reading? Yeah, teacher. Tell me what book you like. I like reading. I said, oh my goodness, her English is bad. But she's communicating. Do you understand what she says? Yes. She is communicating. Of course, she doesn't speak like a C1 or B2 students. We don't expect her to do that. And she's from Kelantan. She doesn't have this environment where everybody speaks not even Malay, Kelantanese dialects. So of course, she will not be able to pronounce certain words. But as I said before, this positivity, allow them to communicate. Make them become human beings, as you say. Yeah? And be human, by being human means you talk to each other. You look at your friends, say, how are you so sad today? But if you use a phone, your friend's over there, why are you so sad? She's just that. And your friend says, I'm sad because you are just here. And you use that gadget. You see what I mean? So this is where humanizing us, learning comes in, where you actually work with each other. As I said to you, it's not just about learning English. English is just a means to communicate. Yeah, it's just a way to communicate. It is us being a human being. And we hope that it will go throughout till university. And one thing about university I think is very important, we talk about the ecosystem, where we actually, part of the ecosystem is to contribute to the community. That should be foregrounded, not just, oh yes, of course, we work with the community. It's not just that, it should be where it is part of the whole learning environment, because when our students see themselves and helping the indigenous group, for example, teach them English and work with them, that is when the heart comes in, because you know that how lucky you are to be able to be at university. There are people who can't even eat, who don't even have money to eat. As you say, no electricity, Tansri, and so on. So what are we doing? So as I said before, these are the things that make us a human being, and we have to do it. We have to do it because we care, and we don't want our people 20 years from now not to be caring and we become robots walking with our handphone all the time. I think that will be a sad situation for all of us.
Thank you, Prof. One of the things I have highlighted, which is quite interesting, has got to do with the element of fun. And when we talk about fun, we talk about meaningful interaction. And I think that's something that is one of the aspirations of 21st century education. And when we talk about meaningful interaction, we are able to personalize what we are learning. Dato Eric, in the private universities, do you think this personalization of the course content with the lives of the students, is it a challenge, or do you think how do you address this?
Yeah, before I talk about that, let me talk about the mobile devices, right? I think, 200 times a day is an understatement because, you see, even when I'm sitting up here, I was so tempted to reach I mean, I just kept wanting to look at my messages. I mean, and I'm not sure if it's because those messages are really so important or it's just so compelling for me. You know, I've been here now for 45 minutes already, not looking at the phone. That's unusual. You know what I mean? That's like abnormal. So much so that my wife has become extremely jealous of my phone. You know, so competitor, right? So, yeah, the last thing I looked at before I go to sleep is my phone. In the middle of the night, if I ever get up to go to the bathroom, it's my phone. And then the first thing in the morning, it's the phone. So it's actually, we are controlled by the phone. Whether or not we know it, whether or not it is really so important. But coming back to that, the question you just asked. I think if you're talking about university curriculum, it is really important for institutions of higher learning to individualize some of their curricula, because everybody has a different style and a different need when it comes to learning. Not everybody learns the same way, and not everybody produces result under a certain process. And therefore, I think while there needs to be a structure, but there also needs to be flexibility to that structure so that students are given the opportunity to express themselves and to explore, to be a little bit risk-taking instead of just complying. I think we have to encourage our students to try different things, and we encourage them to fail. Actually, today I was not supposed to be able to make it because I had a meeting before this, which was a very important meeting. I sit on the board of a media company. So it's a traditional media company, newsprint, right? So now you can imagine newspapers is going out of style. And so media companies the world over are having a very difficult time. They see a decline in their revenues. If they're doing very well by 10% a year, if they're not doing well, maybe 30% decline every year. And so this particular media company that I am a part of is still doing reasonably well, so it is declining at a rate of 10%, but no good. For the past 5 years, it's been declining. Therefore, this morning was our AGM, and after that, we had an emergency, brainstorming session. So the senior management has to meet the board and to really tell us what they want to do, and for the board to also give them, our 2 cents. So I said to them, I think the only way for us to be able to turn around the situation is if you guys start learning how to take risk. You see, because these people are so risk averse. They just want to toe the line. They just don't want to come out of their comfort zone because if they fail, they think there will be repercussion, then there will be punishment. I think there is no bigger punishment than to know that it is a certain death and you still do the same thing. And if you're looking at the conventional education, we understand it is a certain death. I mean, come on, it is not going to be very relevant some years from now, totally irrelevant. So I think it's important for us to encourage our teachers to allow our students to take risk, to give flexibility, and to encourage our students to be bold and brave in their pursuit of acquisition of knowledge. So I think it is not really about. I don't think we should encourage our education system to be one that is totally complying anymore, totally structured, totally complying. We're producing robots, or we're producing students, who are predictably boring and irrelevant. Forget it. I think we should give them some guidelines. I think we have to empower them to become autonomous learners, give them a framework, and then encourage them to explore, to be adventurous, and then grade how brave they are and how much sense they make, and not whether or not it's right or wrong. I think that way we can develop, human capital, even though that human capital is not that kind of human capital, but, useful citizens, for the 21st century.
Thank you, Dato. And as we are coming to the end, I think one of the important aspects is, as we talk about students, I think teachers themselves, we as teachers too, have to also embark on this journey where we explore new teaching strategies, we take risks. And I think that's one thing I think we as teachers, we are a bit reluctant, because we are most of the time we are comfortable in that kind of comfort zone. And some of us who have worked for many years, we become ingrained in that kind of a mindset. I think that's a lesson for a lot of us, especially as we look into something more positive for the future. So, as a final thought, Tan Sri, what are your...
I just want to share two things. One is my conversation with a friend in Germany. When they talk about the fourth industrial revolution, to them, it's at the end of the day, they will cut the number of working days. So for them, the fourth industrial revolution will end up, say, maybe 4 working days. And they've got all the other days to themselves to be human being again. That's the kind of perception that they have. They can go at... Some of them have got already plots outside of Berlin. They've got their own garden. They go and tend their gardens. They plant their own organic thing. They reap of that. They eat from their food. They don't depend on the system, quote unquote, again. I mean, that's their vision of fourth industrial revolution. Our vision of fourth industrial revolution, we become slave of machines. The vision is two very different things. So we need to find out what is it. My worry is that when people talk about something, we also talk about something, But what they talked about and what we talked about are worlds apart. Their life gets better, our life gets worse. Because we don't think. Because we don't take the risk. Because we do not want to raise our voice against the ministry. I mean, that's a challenge to you. Yeah? Unless we begin to raise our voice and say, look, this is not it. We need to, after all, you are the professionals. If you can't do that, then I think stop being a professional, go and do something else. Leave the school alone. You already messed it up as this. There's one. So the thinking is quite different. Now, my second conversation with the Minister of Finland, Education, and I asked him, what is so magical about this Finland school that you talked about? You know, why does it work and how does it work? And the answer is very simple. He says in Finland, as far as education is concerned, we work on the culture of trust. That's it. You know, and I don't quite believe him. I say, what about if somebody betray your trust? He says, Zul, it's a difficult question to answer because I've been working here now for so many years. Nobody broke my trust. And the reason, he says, is very simple. The moment I trust Prof, the moment I trust Dato, then you create what he called a pride of work. Because you trust me, I want to give you the best that I've got. You know, it's almost like if you trust me, if I need to do a painting, I'll do a masterpiece. That you will then hang this masterpiece on the wall. That is the effect of trust. How much trust have we got in our school? And therefore, in Finland, there is no ranking. There's no assessment. Prof was talking about sitting behind the classroom. To them, nobody sits behind the classroom. Nobody evaluates them. Nobody assesses them. And I say, how do they assess themselves? They do assessment by self-reflection. I mean, that's the kind of value that they've got into education, and that is education to me. You know, if you need to be herded like whatever, then it's still not education. We don't have that autonomous learning. We talk about autonomous machine, but the human beings are not autonomous. What is this? The car can move on its own, but human beings needs to be herded again like sheep. I think we got it wrong. I think we need to start with this value. I really believe it starts with the value. And where is the value? It's on the heart. Basically, where do we train our heart? We train this, but where do we train this? We don't. You know? So these are the complexity in the 21st century that we need to go into. And these are the kind of things that I think education would be for the future. If you get it right, then I think we'll get it right. So there are already examples. In the Finland example, the other thing that strikes me is that we give more resources when there is more problem. So they give resources to all the schools that is left behind. Why? Because they want to raise the level so that everybody remains at par. What do Malaysia do? Urban schools get better facilities, rural schools get left out more and more. Talk about the fourth industrial revolution, the urban school will get it, the urban school was still at revolution 2.0, still asking for electricity. The place that I visited in Kota Belud, there was a nice building and I asked, itu bangunan apa? Dia kata, that's our computer classroom, Tan Sri. Tapi tak boleh pakai, tak ada electricity. You know, and up there is already a signboard which says internet tanpa wireless satu Malaysia. You know? So we are kidding ourselves until and unless we get to the real issues, and who will get to the real issues? Us. We will need to speak out, so that the people in the ministry understands and see this is not a provocative thing. This is a real thing on the ground. If they don't believe it, they can go to Suang Pungur and see what it is all about. No water for 42 years, no electricity, 250 students are not doing much. You know? And they go to school, yeah, just to occupy their time, that's it. They don't learn much. And they become part and parcel, the people will then create problems in society. Because they are not balanced, they don't have the values, and they are not educated, quote unquote. I'm sorry if I sound so pessimistic, but I think we need to think about this very seriously. We come at a crossroad, there's a new government now that says we can say anything. Let's say it out, you know, and make sure it is done the way we think it should be done. After all, we are the professionals, we are teachers. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, that's great. Yes, Prof, would you like to share your thoughts? Yes.
Thank you, Sri and Dato. I think the important thing you have raised here about reflection. we do need to reflect. Yeah. And what I mean by reflection, all of us, if we don't reflect, then we don't learn anything, because we keep on doing things without, you know, moving back and say, what have I done? What have we done? What does it help? So these kind of questions we need to train our children as well. Instead of giving them exam, let them reflect, give them time to think. I think what I like about the Finland school is that I was reading a book. A teacher wrote this book. He was from America, and he was so overworked he couldn't continue. So his wife is Finnish. He said, "Why not we go to Finland?" When he went there, he was quite surprised because everybody looked happy. Everybody looked happy. The children look happy. The teachers are happy, and they don't have as much work, but they seem to be performing. And also, when they have an hour of class, 50 minutes for you to do anything you like. So this is, you given your choice. So take a break and do something, and then we continue. So I think what we need to do is that we need to look at ourselves. What are we doing? Ask ourselves that we have done this. Have we improved? Have we make our students want to go to school, and the teachers want to go to school? I think we need to, I'm talking about teachers who care and students who really want to improve. That's a question we need to ask ourselves. Another thing is that, given that we are a country, you see, Malaysia is on the surface rich, but at the same time we do have very poor people, do not have facilities and so on. How do you address this equity? This is what a question of equity. We talk about, our education should address this, equity. How do we do that? How do we get our best teachers to go to rural schools and teach them? How do you do that? So it has to come from us. We need to reflect. We need to think how we can do that so that students in the kampong also get the best teachers. Yeah, so not just that. And so that we can go there, people like us, retired people, I'm retired, maybe I should do some gardening, that we can contribute to society and help the children, help the teachers to have the will, despite all this, they still want to achieve something. I think that's very important. And for the government and us, we are the part of the government, we are Malaysians. For us, again, as I said, reflect and see how we can move forward so that whatever problem we have, we shoulder them together. I think that's very important. We have to work together as a team, not blaming each other. It's because of you. Your English is not good enough. Why are you teaching? Or because of you, you set such high standards. That's another thing. And also we need to look at exam as well, the test. We shouldn't be teaching to the test. We shouldn't. But again, to change need time. And we need to see, are we producing students who will succeed by giving them tests, and those students who got A's, are they really the ones who succeed in real life? We don't know. Yeah, we don't know. Because I was reading a book last night. Some of these, successful people said that I did not enjoy, it's American, I didn't enjoy my life at school, but what helped me was my preschool education. Look at what happened to children at preschool. They are allowed to do whatever they like. They enjoy themselves. They draw things, they dance, they sing, yet they are learning. Why suddenly when they come to standard one, you say, you sit there and you behave. You don't talk. You listen to what I said. When I ask you a question, you answer. When I don't ask, you keep quiet. Why are we doing that? So these are the things that I think, this is self-reflection, and look at how we can move forward together so that we can improve the education, not education, the education environment, the learning environment, the whole ecosystem, not just at school, but also in higher education.
Thank you, Prof. And your final thoughts, Dato?
I've been really inspired by Tan Sri and Professor. And since I'm so inspired, Tan Sri reminded me that, we can say whatever we want. Is it great? The new government says we can criticize, right? So let me just criticize. I think it is wrong for, say, for example, our Malaysian leaders to go visit a foreign country, look at the system, and say, that's a great system. And then they just want to become like that. Say, they go to Singapore. Oh, Singapore's so great. Oh, okay, we copy everything. Singapore, okay, now we want to be Singapore. And then after a few years, another minister comes on board, and then he goes to Finland, right? And then he looks at the Finnish system, and he says, now we want to be like Finland, and then forget about Singapore, now we're Finland. And then we are finished. You know what I mean? You see, I think it is really important for Malaysia to have its own path. We have to chart our own path. We cannot be blindly copying all these developed models, developed countries' models, just because it works there. Say, for example, you think about it. If you try the Finnish system here, you usually don't teach, right? You allow our students to do whatever they want to. I tell you, I think Malaysia will be finished in 20 years' time. I mean, none of our children, when they grow up, will ever be able to speak or do anything. I think every country has a unique context. We cannot just blindly copy. I think we need to look around. We need to learn as much as we can from all these more developed countries about their systems and all that. And then when we come back, we need to look at ourselves, our current situation, our constraints. Let's understand about constraints, not just financial constraints, but also cultural constraints, and there are many constraints. And then see how we can create a system, an educational system, an education system that is just right for the Malaysian society. I think that way, and you know, once we decide what to do, please don't change it every 5 years, because you know, teachers, they really can't. I mean, if they do that, then you know, I think we're bluffing ourselves. We have to stay true to you know, a system that's been implemented. I mean, put ego aside. It is not always your legacy. It can be somebody else's legacy if it is right. Is it correct? You don't need to always have your legacy. Just so for the sake of having that legacy, I want to change the system. I want to implement a new system for the sake of implementing a new system. I think not at the expense of the future generation. I think ego is immaterial. Let's think of the big picture. Allow our teachers to follow through if the system is working, because it does take time for education, you know, systems to be fully implemented and to see results. So I hope I will not be called for coffee.
Thank you so much. Sure, Prof.
I think one thing which is very important when we talk about education system, we need to have what I call what we're going to achieve, what we want to achieve as a nation. Yeah, that has to be clear, because if we are not clear with that, we cannot achieve it. What Dato is talking about is how you're going to achieve it, the different approaches. We may have different approaches of achieving the same thing. So what, as a nation, I think we have to be very clear. This is what we want to have for our students at the end of their learning journey. We are very clear that, and these are the things that we need to do. But there are different ways of doing things. And like you said, Dato, there are certain things that you do might work for this group of students. For, you know, like for example, you have a class with both good, excellent students and poor students in the same class, then you have to do something different. But if you are in, say, Bangsa, Bukit Bandaraya perhaps, or, you know, you have students who are actually C1. then you be, you see what I mean? But all of us want the same thing. We have to be very clear that we want our students to be balanced. Number one, we want our students to be able to adapt to the changing situation so that they don't give up easily. We want resilient children. We want our teachers to be resilient as well. They have to adapt to the situation. We want to give them the will. We want to motivate them. We want to inspire them. But at the same time, they've got to be critical so that they can see what is good, what is not good for them. All of us have to be critical and also be creative so that by being creative, we can innovate. That is, and plus the heart, of course, we need to have people who innovate, yet at the same time who care. Not just care for your family, care for people you work with, care for your children especially. If we have that, we will not go wrong. However we're going to do it, that's for us to do, so it's best. You say that. And thank you all, for your thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I think in this 90 minutes of our conversation, in a nutshell, I would say that we should be mindful of what we are doing and not doing in a mindless manner. Mindfulness and mindlessness are two different things, I would say. And I think that's the crust of it, is being mindful of what we are doing. I thoroughly enjoyed myself being with the midst of the three of you here, and I think I find myself really fueled up, I would say, to look at things from a different perspective and to be aware about what transformative pedagogies are. You have truly shared your visions, I would say. That's the theme of our conference, and you have really shared with us, and I think all of us have gained a lot. So thank you ever so much for this time with us here, and I'd like to hand it over to the MC.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chandran and the distinguished panelists, for your deep insights on language education in Education 4.0, to be or not to be. Please remain on stage for the presentation of souvenirs. Esteemed guests, to show our appreciation, we would like to invite Yang Berusaha, Dr. Mohd Nasruddin bin Basar, Chair of ICT-LD 2018, accompanied by Yang Berusaha, Dr. Nagalingam Karpaya, Co-Chair of ICT-LD 2018, to present tokens of appreciation to the distinguished panelists. Our first token of appreciation is presented to Prof. Tan Sri Dato Zulkifli Abdul Razak, followed by Prof. Dr. Zuraidah Muhammad Don, and finally Dato Chong. Thank you very much, Yang Berusaha, Dr. Mohd Nasruddin bin Basar, and Yang Berusaha, Dr. Nagalingam Karpaya, for the kind gesture. The distinguished panelists are kindly invited to return to their respective seats and for a photo shoot. Panelists are kindly requested to remain on stage for the photo shoot. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the memorable shot. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the forum session of 4th International Conference on Teacher Learning and Development ICTLD 2018.